Welcome to Midnight Archives, a place where silence carries stories and the night remembers what the day forgets. Tonight's record is not about what is seen, but about what cannot be explained. A locked room, no escape, no entry, and yet someone dies. Not by force, not by poison, but by something that should not have been there at all. Close your eyes if you wish, but listen carefully, because in this case, the smallest detail is the only thing that survives the dark. London, early morning, too early for visitors, too early for reason, and yet someone is already waiting. A woman, dressed in black, her face hidden behind a veil. Not grief, not yet. Fear, the kind that does not speak clearly, only trembles. Upstairs, Sherlock Holmes is awake before the hour. Unusual, precise, because something about this moment does not belong to the ordinary world. A knock, not loud, but urgent, not repeated, because whoever stands behind it has no time left for hesitation. Holmes turns, Watson rises, and somewhere between sleep and reason, a case begins. On glancing over my notes of the 70-odd cases in which I have, during the last 8 years, studied the methods of my friend Sherlock Holmes, I find many tragic, some comic, a large number merely strange, but none commonplace. For working as he did rather for the love of his art than for the acquirement of wealth, he refused to associate himself with any investigation which did not tend towards the unusual and even the fantastic. Of all these varied cases, however, I cannot recall any which presented more singular features than that which was associated with the well-known Surrey family of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran. The events in question occurred in the early days of my association with Holmes, when we were sharing rooms as bachelors in Baker Street. It is possible that I might have placed them upon record before, but a promise of secrecy was made at the time, from which I have only been freed during the last month by the untimely death of the lady to whom the pledge was given. It is perhaps as well that the facts should now come to light, for I have reasons to know that there are widespread rumors as to the death of Dr. Grimesby Roylott, which tend to make the matter even more terrible than the truth. It was early in April in the year '83 that I woke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing, fully dressed, by the side of my bed. He was a late riser as a rule, and as the clock on the mantelpiece showed me that it was only 7:15, I blinked up at him in some surprise. "Very sorry to knock you up, Watson," said he, "but it is the common lot this morning." "Mrs. Hudson has been knocked up," she retorted upon me, "and I on you." "No, a client. It seems that a young lady has arrived in a considerable state of excitement who insists upon seeing me. Should it prove to be an interesting case, you would, I am sure, wish to follow it from the outset. My dear fellow, I would not miss it for anything. I had no keener pleasure than in following Holmes in his professional investigations and in admiring the rapid deductions with which he unraveled the problems which were submitted to him. I rapidly threw on my clothes and was ready in a few minutes to accompany my friend down to the sitting room. A lady dressed in black and heavily veiled rose as we entered. "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerily. "Pray draw up to the fire, for I observe that you are shivering." "It is not cold which makes me shiver," said the woman in a low voice. "It is fear, Mr. Holmes. It is terror." She raised her veil, and we could see that she was indeed in a pitiable state of agitation, her face all drawn and grey, with restless, frightened eyes. Sherlock Holmes ran her over with one of his quick glances. "You must not fear," said he soothingly. "You have come in by train this morning, I see. You know me, then?" "No, but I observe the second half of a return ticket in the palm of your left glove." The lady gave a violent start and stared in bewilderment. "There is no mystery, my dear madam," said he. "The left arm of your jacket is spattered in mud in no less than 7 places." "I started from home before 6, reached Leatherhead at 20 past, and came in by the first train to Waterloo," said she.
"Sir, I can stand this strain no longer. I shall go mad if it continues. Oh, sir, do you not think that you could help me too, and at least throw a little light through the dense darkness which surrounds me? My name is Helen Stoner, and I am living with my stepfather, who is the last survivor of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran." Holmes nodded his head. "The name is familiar to me," said he.
The family were at one time among the richest in England, and the estates extended over the borders into Berkshire and Hampshire. In the last century, however, 4 successive heirs were of a wasteful disposition, and the family ruin was completed by a gambler in the days of the Regency. Nothing was left save a few acres of ground and the 200-year-old house, which is itself crushed under a heavy mortgage. My stepfather, seeing that he must adapt himself, obtained a medical degree and went out to Calcutta, where he established a large practice. In a fit of anger, however, he beat his native butler to death and narrowly escaped a capital sentence. He suffered a long term of imprisonment and afterwards returned to England a morose and disappointed man. When Dr. Roylott was in India, he married my mother. Shortly after our return to England, my mother died in a railway accident near Crewe. Dr. Roylott then took us to live with him in the old ancestral house at Stoke Moran. But a terrible change came over our stepfather. He shut himself up in his house and seldom came out save to indulge in ferocious quarrels. Violence of temper approaching to mania has been hereditary in the men of the family. He became the terror of the village. He has a passion also for Indian animals, and he has at this moment a cheetah and a baboon which wander freely over his grounds. My poor sister Julia and I had no great pleasure in our lives. No servant would stay with us, and for a long time we did all the work of the house. She died just 2 years ago, and it is of her death that I wish to speak to you. Within a fortnight of her wedding day, the terrible event occurred. The bedrooms are on the ground floor and all open out into the same corridor. That fatal night, Dr. Roylott had gone to his room early. My sister was troubled by the smell of the strong Indian cigars which it was his custom to smoke. She left her room and came into mine, where she sat for some time. At 11 o'clock she rose to leave me, but she paused at the door and looked back. "Tell me, Helen," said she, "have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of the night?" "Never," said I, "because during the last few nights I have always, about 3 in the morning, heard a low, clear whistle. I am a light sleeper and it has awakened me." "No, I have not," I replied. "It must be those wretched gypsies in the plantation." "Very likely," she said. She smiled back at me and closed my door, and a few moments later I heard her key turn in the lock. "Was it your custom always to lock yourselves in at night?" asked Holmes. "Always." "And why?" "I think that I mentioned to you that the doctor kept a cheetah and a baboon. We had no feeling of security unless our doors were locked." I could not sleep that night. A vague feeling of impending misfortune impressed me. It was a wild night, with the wind howling outside and the rain splashing against the windows. Suddenly, amid the gale, there burst forth the wild scream of a terrified woman. I knew it was my sister's voice. As I opened my door, I seemed to hear a low whistle and a clanging sound, as if a mass of metal had fallen. My sister's door revolved slowly upon its hinges. I saw her appear, her face blanched with terror, her hands groping for help. She fell to the ground, writhing in pain. As I bent over her, she suddenly shrieked out in a voice I shall never forget. "Oh my God, Helen! It was the band, the Speckled Band!" She stabbed with her finger into the air in the direction of the doctor's room, but a convulsion choked her words. She died without recovering consciousness.
Holmes asked if I was sure about the whistle and metallic sound. I told him it was my strong impression. She was found with a charred match in her hand, showing she had struck a light when the alarm took place. The coroner was unable to find any cause of death. The door was fastened from the inside, the windows were blocked by iron bars, and the chimney was barred up. She was quite alone. 2 years have passed, and I am now engaged to be married. 2 days ago, repairs started in my room, so I had to move into the chamber in which my sister died. Last night, as I lay awake, I suddenly heard the same low whistle which had been the herald of her death. I was too shaken to go to bed again. As soon as it was daylight, I drove to see you. Miss Roylott, you are screening your stepfather, said Holmes. He pushed back the black lace on her hand to reveal 5 little livid spots, the marks of 4 fingers and a thumb printed upon her white wrist. You have been cruelly used, said Holmes. This is a very deep business, he said at last. We have not a moment to lose. If we were to come to Stoke Moran today, would it be possible to see these rooms without his knowledge? He is in town today, she replied, and will be away all day. Excellent, said Holmes. Watson, we shall both come.
You may expect us early in the afternoon, said Holmes. Helen Stoner dropped her thick black veil and glided from the room. It seems to me a dark and sinister business, I remarked. Dark enough, Holmes replied. He pondered the nocturnal whistles, the band of gypsies, and the metallic clang. But what in the name of the devil? Our door was suddenly dashed open, and a huge man framed himself in the aperture. His face was marked with every evil passion, and his eyes had the resemblance of a bird of prey. "Which of you is Holmes?" asked this apparition. "I am Dr. Grimesby Roylott of Stoke Moran." "Indeed, doctor," said Holmes blandly. "Pray take a seat." "I will do nothing of the kind," he screamed. "I know you, you scoundrel. You are Holmes the meddler, the busybody." Holmes only chuckled. "I am a dangerous man to fall foul of," the doctor snarled. He stepped forward, seized the steel poker, and bent it into a curve with his huge brown hands. "See that you keep yourself out of my grip." He hurled the twisted poker into the fireplace and strode out. "He seems a very amiable person," said Holmes, laughing. With a sudden effort, he picked up the poker and straightened it out again. By 1 o'clock, Holmes returned from his excursion with notes on the late wife's will. It proved that the doctor had the strongest motives for preventing the sisters' marriages, as it would cripple him financially. "This is too serious for dawdling, Watson. Slip your revolver into your pocket, and Ailey's number 2 is an excellent argument with gentlemen who can twist steel pokers into knots." At Waterloo, we caught a train for Leatherhead and drove through the lovely Surrey lanes. There was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of spring and the sinister quest upon which we were engaged. My companion sat buried in the deepest thought. Suddenly, he pointed over the meadows toward the grey gables of a very old mansion. "Stoke Moran," he said. "That be the house of Dr. Grimesby Roylott," remarked the driver, pointing to a grey mansion jutting from the trees. Holmes decided we should approach on foot, pretending to be architects to avoid local gossip. Miss Stoner met us with joy, relieved that the doctor was away in town. But when Holmes revealed their morning encounter, she turned white to the lips. "He is so cunning," she cried. "I never know when I am safe." Holmes looked at the decaying building, its curving wings reaching out like the claws of a crab. He examined the windows of the 3 bedrooms, noting the scaffolding against the end wall. There was no real need for repairs, he observed. suggesting it was merely an excuse to move Helen into her sister's room. Testing the heavy iron shutters from the outside, Holmes found them impossible to force. Inside, we entered the room where Julia had met her fate. It was a homely room with brown, worm-eaten oak paneling. Holmes sat in silence, his eyes traveling over every detail. He pointed to a thick bell rope hanging beside the bed, its tassel lying upon the pillow. It was put there only 2 years ago, Helen explained, though her sister never used it. Holmes gave the rope a brisk tug. "Why, it is a dummy," he said. It was not even attached to a wire, but fastened to a hook just above a small ventilator. "How strange," Holmes muttered, "that a builder would open a ventilator into another room instead of the outside air. Dummy bell ropes and ventilators which do not ventilate. These were most interesting changes. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall now carry our researches into the inner apartment." I had never seen my friend's face so grim, or his brow so dark, as it was when we turned from the scene of this investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break in upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. "It is very essential, Miss Stoner," said he, "that you should absolutely follow my advice in every respect. I shall most certainly do so. The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance. I assure you that I am in your hands. In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room." Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. "Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that is the village inn over there." "Yes, that is the Crown." "Very good. Your windows would be visible from there?" "Certainly. You must confine yourself to your room on pretense of a headache when your stepfather comes back. Then, when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the shutters of your window, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then withdraw quietly with everything which you are likely to want into the room which you used to occupy. I have no doubt that in spite of the repairs, you could manage there for one night." "Oh yes, easily. The rest you will leave in our hands." "But what will you do?" "We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of this noise which has disturbed you." "I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you have already made up your mind," said Miss Stoner, laying her hand upon my companion's sleeve. "Perhaps I have. Then, for pity's sake, tell me what was the cause of my sister's death. I should prefer to have clearer proofs before I speak. You can at least tell me whether my own thought is correct, and if she died from some sudden fright." "No, I do not think so. I think that there was probably some more tangible cause. And now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Dr. Roylott returned and saw us, our journey would be in vain. Goodbye, and be brave, for if you will do what I have told you, you may rest assured that we shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten you."
Sherlock Holmes and I had no difficulty in engaging a bedroom and sitting room at the Crown Inn. They were on the upper floor, and from our window we could command a view of the avenue gate and of the inhabited wing of Stoke Manor House. At dusk we saw Dr. Grimesby Roylott drive past, his huge form looming up beside the little figure of the lad who drove him. The boy had some slight difficulty in undoing the heavy iron gates, and we heard the hoarse roar of the doctor's voice and saw the fury with which he shook his clenched fists at him. The trap drove on, and a few minutes later we saw a sudden light spring up among the trees as the lamp was lit in one of the sitting rooms. "Do you know, Watson," said Holmes as we sat together in the gathering darkness, "I have really some scruples as to taking you tonight. There is a distinct element of danger. Can I be of assistance?" Your presence might be invaluable. Then I shall certainly come. It is very kind of you. You speak of danger. You have evidently seen more in these rooms than was visible to me. No, but I fancy that I may have deduced a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did. I saw nothing remarkable save the bell rope, and what purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine. You saw the ventilator too. Yes, but I do not think that it is such a very unusual thing to have a small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could hardly pass through. I knew that we should find a ventilator before ever we came to Stoke Manor. My dear Holmes. Oh yes, I did. You remember in her statement she said that her sister could smell Dr. Roylott's cigar. Now, of course, that suggested at once that there must be a communication between the two rooms. It could only be a small one, or it would have been remarked upon at the coroner's inquiry. I deduced a ventilator. But what harm can there be in that? Well, there is at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator is made, a cord is hung, and a lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does not that strike you? I cannot as yet see any connection. Did you observe anything very peculiar about that bed? No, it was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that before? I cannot say that I have. The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it was clearly never meant for a bell pull. Holmes, I cried, I seem to see dimly what you are hinting at. We are only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime. Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has nerve and he has knowledge. This man strikes even deeper, but I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. But we shall have horrors enough before the night is over. For goodness sake, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds for a few hours to something more cheerful. About 9 o'clock, the light among the trees was extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away, and then suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone out right in front of us. "That is our signal," said Holmes, springing to his feet. "It comes from the middle window." As we passed out, he exchanged a few words with the landlord, explaining that we were going on a late visit to an acquaintance. A moment later, we were out on the dark road, a chill wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow light twinkling in front of us through the gloom to guide us on our somber errand. There was little difficulty in entering the grounds, for unrepaired breaches gaped in the old park wall. Making our way among the trees, we reached the lawn, crossed it, and were about to enter through the window, when out from a clump of laurel bushes there darted what seemed to be a hideous and distorted child, who threw itself on the grass with writhing limbs and then ran swiftly across the lawn into the darkness. "My God," I whispered, "did you see it?" Holmes was for the moment as startled as I. His hand closed like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear. "It is a nice household," he murmured. "That is the baboon." I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. There was a cheetah, too. Perhaps we might find it upon our shoulders at any moment. I confess that I felt easier in my mind when, after following Holmes's example and slipping off my shoes, I found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters, moved the lamp onto the table, and cast his eyes round the room. Then, creeping up to me and making a trumpet of his hand, he whispered into my ear again so gently that it was all that I could do to distinguish the words. The least sound would be fatal to our plans. I nodded to show that I had heard. We must sit without light. He would see it through the ventilator. I nodded again. Do not go asleep. Your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed, and you in that chair. I took out my revolver and laid it on the corner of the table. Holmes had brought up a long, thin cane, and this he placed on the bed beside him. By it he laid the box of matches and the stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. How shall I ever forget that dreadful vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of a breath, and yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed within a few feet of me in the same state of nervous tension in which I was myself. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute darkness. From outside came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once at our very window a long-drawn cat-like whine which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away we could hear the deep tones of the parish clock which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarters! 12 struck, and 1, and 2, and 3, and still we sat waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly, there was the momentary gleam of a light up in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, but was succeeded by a strong smell of burning oil and heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent once more, though the smell grew stronger. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. Then suddenly another sound became audible, a very gentle, soothing sound, like that of a small jet of steam escaping continually from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously at the bell pull.
"You see it, Watson," he yelled. "You see it?" But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light, I heard a low, clear whistle, but the sudden glare flashing into my weary eyes made it impossible for me to tell what it was at which my friend lashed so savagely. I could, however, see that his face was deadly pale and filled with horror and loathing. He had ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. It swelled up louder and louder, a hoarse yell of pain and fear and anger, all mingled in the one dreadful shriek. They say that away down in the village, and even in the distant parsonage, that cry raised the sleepers from their beds. It struck cold to our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes, and he at me, until the last echoes of it had died away into the silence from which it rose. "What can it mean?" I gasped. "It means that it is all over," Holmes answered, "and perhaps, after all, it is for the best. Take your pistol, and we will enter Dr. Roylott's room." With a grave face, he lit the lamp and led the way down the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered, I at his heels, with the cocked pistol in my hand. It was a singular sight which met our eyes. On the table stood a dark lantern with the shutter half open, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon the iron safe, the door of which was ajar. Beside this table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimesby Roylott, clad in a long grey dressing gown. His chin was cocked upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful, rigid stare at the corner of the ceiling. Round his brow he had a peculiar yellow band with brownish speckles, which seemed to be bound tightly round his head. As we entered, he made neither sound nor motion. "The band, the speckled band," whispered Holmes. I took a step forward. In an instant, his strange headgear began to move, and there reared itself from among his hair the squat diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. "It is a swamp adder," cried Holmes, "the deadliest snake in India. He has died within 10 seconds of being bitten." Violence does in truth recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the pit which he digs for another. Let us thrust this creature back into its den, and we can then remove Miss Stoner to some place of shelter and let the county police know what has happened. As he spoke, he drew the dog whip swiftly from the dead man's lap, and throwing the noose round the reptile's neck, he drew it from its horrid perch and threw it into the iron safe, which he closed upon it. Such are the true facts of the death of Dr. Grimesby Roylott of Stoke Moran. The little which I had yet to learn of the case was told me by Sherlock Holmes as we travelled back next day. "I had," said he, "come to an entirely erroneous conclusion,
which shows, my dear Watson, how dangerous it always is to reason from insufficient data. The presence of the gypsies and the use of the word band were sufficient to put me upon an entirely wrong scent. My attention was speedily drawn to this ventilator and to the bell rope which hung down to the bed. The discovery that this was a dummy and that the bed was clamped to the floor instantly gave rise to the suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole and coming to the bed. The idea of a snake instantly occurred to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge that the doctor was furnished with a supply of creatures from India, I felt that I was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemical test was just such a one as would occur to a clever and ruthless man. He had trained it, probably by the use of the milk which we saw, to return to him when summoned. He would put it through this ventilator with the certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. An inspection of his chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing on it, which of course would be necessary in order that he should reach the ventilator. The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner was obviously caused by her stepfather hastily closing the door of his safe upon its terrible occupant. I heard the creature hiss, as I have no doubt that you did also, and I instantly lit the light and attacked it, with the result of driving it through the ventilator, and also with the result of causing it to turn upon its master at the other side. Some of the blows of my cane came home and roused its snakish temper so that it flew on the first person it saw. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimesby Roylott's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily on my conscience.